Okay, so this is my review of Doom Patrol Season 2, Episode 8, Dad Patrol. So we're clearly dealing with this theme throughout this episode about being a father, struggling with it, and also the reverse side of having daddy issues. That's Niles being a father to Dorothy, Cliff dealing with his daughter and Clara, Larry still having a lot of guilt as a father, and Jane coming to terms with the struggles Miranda and Kay had with their father. So I'm going to break my review down into the different character stories in this episode. I want to start first with Jane's storyline with Larry. Where this episode really shined thematically was in Jane's story. We see how it opens, where we see Kay was put in a bucket by the dad, and then Miranda was put in a bucket. So as Jane is learning about this, the audience is gaining sympathy for Miranda, as is Jane. And it worked well that the reason Jane would go after Harry, the doll that Kay lost as a child in that well, is to prove her worth still. And this fear now that Jane has building up because Miranda's taken over and now other personalities are disappearing, she thinks that maybe she's cleaning house and that she could be the next to go. And what makes that kind of story unique and fresh is that there's an angle to it that it's actually good for Kay that she's letting go of all these personalities. So Jane's conflicted, and she says that to Larry, saying that she didn't think she'd be a casualty of this, that she thought she was indispensable. And visually, the themes connect well, where it's Jane now going down this well like Kay and Miranda did to finally connect to them and understand their side of the story, build sympathy for them, and then Miranda coming up and showing her resilience out of that well. And we see Jane literally does a 360 now and comes to Miranda and says she will do what she wants, she'll fall in line. But this is where another twist comes about, and Miranda pushes her in the well and throws Harry the doll in there, and we find out that Jane's true instinct was true, that Miranda's just literally cleaning house here, and we see the other two missing personalities are also in that well. So it's a nice cliffhanger for Jane's story. Larry's part of this. I've said in my previous reviews that Larry, to me, is still the most boring storyline, and I feel like they're running out of steam with his story about detaching and not detaching from his family, struggling as the guilt of abandonment for his kids, and trying to get rid of Captain Larry, he says. But even this flashback with his son just felt like it was forced in to fit with the theme of the fatherhood in this episode, and we didn't really learn anything new with Larry, so it's a lot of him just kind of whining and remorsing, and you don't actually really feel it. You kind of just watch it and watch him go through it. So with Cliff's story, it's interesting because finally, after a season and a half of this being built up, he's really now getting to catch up with his daughter, Clara. We see she's pregnant, and he learns that she's getting married to her partner. There's some parts about this story I really liked in this episode. I really liked that the moment when Jane was looking for someone to help her originally, and she always goes to Cliff, and he's like a father figure to her. And then she sees Clara, another threat to her existence and her purpose in Cliff's life. So that tied well the fear that Jane had in her face seeing that and someone possibly taking her role. And I really like the director's subtle but emphasis on just a moment here where Clara invites him to the wedding. It's all happy, and before she leaves, she actually touches his robot hand for the first time while he leads her into the car. There's something powerful about that I really liked. But you see the line he says that nothing can keep him away from going to the wedding. I'm sure that's setting up for that not to be the case. So that probably will be a story with Cliff coming up where he is trying to make the wedding and can't for some reason. I also like this little story and theme they had about Cliff and the steel part of that family, her breaking that cycle of bad parenting and running and encouraging Clara in that aspect, even though he went a little far there. But for this season as a whole, I haven't really said this yet, but now I'm really feeling it. I feel like Cliff this season has been extra cartoonish compared to season 1. And I feel like maybe the writers got really excited about how funny of a character he is, but they're really firing on all cylinders with it. And sometimes I feel like they need to take a step back a little bit and remember he's still rooted from a human character. And I don't feel like that's the case as much anymore. And he feels pure robot in a sense. So I hope they kind of tone him down a little bit. I love the humor of Cliff, don't get me wrong, but there's a point where he gets like really, really dumb. And it's like, okay, he wasn't that dumb in season 1, or he didn't have a clever line every second in season 1. He had some moments of just clarity and talking somewhat normal, so I hope they can bring it back. Now, the Rita and Vic storyline here is mostly comic relief for the episode. We get another funny montage, but this time it's Rita daydreaming about Beekeeper and Borg, which was great. I still think it's really funny, her embracing the superhero side and her being the beekeeper. But the big plot reveal here for Cyborg's story is that Ronnie took the Uma jelly, which we saw in the cliffhanger last episode, and she goes and murders someone responsible for the tech in her body. So she's on a vengeance path, which is clearly going to conflict with someone who is a very just superhero in Cyborg. And it's that age-old conflict we see in stories like this where he loves her, but he knows he has to stop her for his better judgment. So we'll see how that kind of story goes. Makes it a little more interesting, I guess, the Cyborg and Ronnie story, but it's not the best. And poor Rita here, the beekeeper, coming a little late, but she tried. But my favorite part of this episode still had to be Niles and Dorothy's story, because we had such a crazy cliffhanger with Niles last week that he was about to go through to Kipling to get rid of his own daughter. And you see Kipling's really putting the pressure on him now because this bunny informs them of a catastrophe on its way. So he wants to do it sooner. And he's like, Dorothy can't mature any further. Of course, she ends up having her period. And there's a lot of sadness in this because you're seeing it in Niles' eyes. Timothy Dalton's just playing this role so well, and he really brings his all. And I appreciate that from an older actor who's been around and has done so much great work, and then he still gives 110% in something that might not be maybe his favorite project per se. And I love that we're at this fair now with Dorothy. You're always on edge when Dorothy's on screen that something can go wrong. I think it makes it that much more thrilling. I like that the visions of the mom came up to Dorothy saying it's time. And I absolutely love this fun house sequence with the clowns for Dorothy. Abigail Shapiro, who plays Dorothy, also kills it in this episode, and it's pure horror here with the candlemaker showing up. And not only that, the horror of Niles dying at a rapid pace now, and Dorothy kind of facing that. But now Kipling shows up to Niles and says they missed their chance, it's too late, she's matured, and now everything's melting into wax, which is really cool. The candlemaker is ready to raise hell. This is a really awesome cliffhanger, so I'm really excited for next week. I'm giving this episode an 8.8. I thought Jane's story and the Niles and Dorothy stuff really stood out. Cliff's was pretty good. Again, not crazy about this Larry story, and Cyborg and Ronnie, I guess a little better. And Rita's kind of been playing comic relief a lot recently, but she did have a lot of screen time in the middle, so it makes kind of sense they kind of focused her that way at the moment. Please let me know what you thought of this episode down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I read every comment and try to respond as many as I can. Please check out my interview with April Bowlby, Rita Farr herself. That will be linked down below. It's a really fun time. And please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss one of my reviews of Doom Patrol. I review a bunch of shows, movies, and I also do celebrity interviews, so you want to check those out. And please follow me at SteveVarley1 on Twitter and Instagram for more of me. And I'll see you next time.